everyone. I'm Dr. Hinson.
And I'm Dr. Donnelly.
And we're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. And we are back with our analysis and recap of episode 4 of Netflix's The Crown, entitled Act of God. And full disclosure, we didn't really care for this episode a whole lot. It is about a fog that descends on London, a persistent anti-cyclone, which happened one other time in Donora, Pennsylvania. Shout out, I'm from Pittsburgh. That's outside of Pittsburgh.
Claim to fame.
That's the most exciting thing that happened in this episode for me, was that there was a reference to Donora.
So what happens is that this anticyclone traps all the toxic fumes from industrialization,
all the smog,
and kills people. 12,000 people died.
Estimates between 3,000 and 12,000 people were killed in 6 days in London.
It's insane. It's a real issue.
It's a really big deal, and we're not making light of pollution or industrialization or the negative impacts thereof.
No, what we are making light of is 45 minutes spent on internal Tory political machinations.
Yeah, things I did not need to see was all of this, will he, won't we, how can we get Churchill out of here, he's out of touch with his people. By almost an accident ends up to find a literal accident where the woman, Venetia, that he had formed a professional attachment to, who somewhat idolizes him and really sees him as this powerful leader, gets hit by a car because of the fog. And when he gets called that she's dead and wants to go visit her in the hospital, finds out that everybody's sick from the fog he's been ignoring.
Yeah, because he kept saying it's an act of God, it's an act of God.
It'll lift, we don't have to do anything about it.
Yeah, the most important thing we have to worry about is that the Duke of Edinburgh wants to take flying lessons.
Yeah.
So what we learn in this is that Churchill is old and out of touch.
Yes.
Which I think could have easily been summarized in about 3 minutes, but thanks.
They already have an heir and a spare, so why do they care if the prince wants to kill himself in a plane?
I don't understand.
I don't know.
I don't understand, but
Nope.
I understood very little about the necessity for this episode, except that once again, 2 gentlemen wrote and directed it.
Dominated the episode in terms of stories about men.
So, I suppose maybe in the grander scheme of things, the political state of England is important, but I was much more intrigued by Elizabeth's understanding of how she was supposed to react to this act of God.
Yes.
And she was getting very close to speaking to Churchill herself to essentially advocate for her people and be like, people are dying, no one can leave the house, this isn't okay.
My husband's flying, which he can't do during the fog anyway, can wait until we deal with this major crisis. And
yeah, sure, maybe you have to wait for the fog to lift, but you know what we could do in the meantime is send some more money to those hospitals.
Yeah.
We could light some more lamps.
We could be doing things, and she really struggles with what Elizabeth Regina is supposed to do in this, and she talks to her private secretary to try and get some advice about what her father would have done. Lots of internal.
And I appreciate that the private secretary was very clear. This is what King George would have done, but you need to decide what Queen Elizabeth will do.
Yeah.
Which I think was an incredibly important point to make, because it would have been very easy for that guy in particular to say, well, this is what King George would have done, so do what King George would have done. And he was like, you have to be your own person.
I was surprised by that, because I think Tommy Lascelles is such a stickler and such a part of this old school of dudes that surround Queen Elizabeth, that I thought he was going to be like, oh, well, your father would have done this, and that's what you should do because he was a man and he knew best. But he didn't. He said, you have to find your own path in this, which I think must have been frightening for her, but the right thing to say.
Yeah, because I have a feeling Elizabeth Windsor would have been out there rolling up her hands, rolling up her sleeves and taking care of people.
Yeah, in the hospital, helping people.
Yeah, and Elizabeth Regina isn't allowed to do that.
Yeah.
I think if Elizabeth Regina was crowned now in history, that's exactly what she would be doing, because the Queen isn't now encouraged as Elizabeth Regina in current time.
Yes.
She is much more involved in the world.
Yeah.
Than I think she was at the beginning.
But she says it doesn't feel natural as the head of state to do nothing. But that is exactly what is required of her in this. She gets to the point where she decides if she doesn't hear from Churchill, she's going to say something to him. She summons him to her office, only to find out that by chance and accident he had been at the hospital and sat in the hospital furiously writing a speech to the press in which he recognized the crisis. And so by the time he arrives in the morning to Buckingham Palace, the fog has literally lifted, and he has saved his bacon once again. Barely.
Yeah, but I mean, it was really clear too, and when we're talking about leadership with Churchill, the reason he is so, like, historically powerful is that when push came to shove, he did the right thing.
Yeah.
And he did it dramatically and with press.
Yeah. He's an extraordinarily smart politician.
Yeah.
And leader in that sense, in that he knows, sometimes even if it accidentally slaps him upside the head, when the right moment comes and how to handle himself, and was an extraordinary orator.
Oh, 100%.
And
Yeah.
person, and really strong wordsmith. So.
Mm-hmm. Other than that, we learned that the Clean Air Act of 1956 was passed to make sure that this would never happen again.
Useful to know.
Because, I mean, London fog is clearly a bit of a stereotype.
Yeah.
And I have been in foggy London town.
Foggy London
When
town.
it has been foggy many times, I've never not been able to see in front of my face.
Yeah, that was scary.
That was intense.
That was persistent anticyclones. Not
Hard pass.
something to be messing with.
That's a hard pass.
Yeah.
But that's all we got for this one.
Yeah, I mean, effectively at the end, she has another kind of reflexive questioning of herself, and she's worried about losing herself in this position. You know, that's fine for the sovereign to have a position on nothing, to have no point of view, but where does that leave me? And I was thinking at the end, I was like, oh, honey, but you didn't listen to your
grandma.
To your granny, because there isn't a you anymore.
Yeah.
And as horrible as that sounds, Elizabeth Windsor's opinion doesn't matter anymore. And so I wrote down, at what stage does she realize that she can't be herself anymore? And how long does that take? And how much damage to her personal relationships is that going to cause? Which I think is probably not a happy answer. But it extraordinarily, I think for me, really brings home the difficulty of the situation that she was put in.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because I wouldn't have been able to sit on my hands.
No, I would have called him, and like I would have had such a political kerfuffle, because I would have like stormed into Churchill's office and been like, people are dying.
Yeah, I at least would have called him and been like, explain to me what we're doing.
Explain to me why my husband's flying is more important than bodies in the streets, dear Winston. Yeah, but that's what we have for you for this episode. A bit shorter video than normal. I think we'll be back at it, hopefully, with episode 5, with a bit more to talk about than the fog of London in 1956, 1952, whatever, the 50s, and Tory politics, which is not the most...
Welcome to the 50s.
Which, you know, Tory politics is like gonna put us to sleep at night, so...
I just paint drying is more entertaining most of the time, so...
Fingers crossed for non-Tory politics the next episode.
For episode 5. So in the meantime, I'm Dr. Donnelly.
I'm Dr. Hinson.
And we're the good doctors of Abbey Research, wishing you a Tory politician-free week.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.